Dara had always been the center of attention. Her beauty, charm, and infectious humor made her the favorite among her classmates at the University of Ilorin. Despite coming from a humble background, she carried herself like a queen, never letting anyone see the struggles she endured behind closed doors. But beneath her dazzling exterior, greed gnawed at her soul. She wanted more money, more luxury, more admiration. She was tired of managing, tired of eating basic meals while her friends flaunted designer bags and dined at Item 7, the most luxurious restaurant in Ilorin. Her friends' boyfriends spoiled them with expensive outings, weekend getaways, and the latest iPhones, while she had to settle for Ola, a good man, but in her eyes, a broke one. Ola wasn't exactly poor. He made his money legitimately, unlike the Yahoo boys, who roamed Ilorin's streets in flashy cars. He was caring, responsible, and saw a future with Dara. But he wasn't lavish. He didn't believe in spending recklessly just to impress a woman. One evening, as they walked past Item 7, Dara sighed loudly. "Ola, can't you at least take me inside? My friends eat here every week." Ola chuckled, shaking his head. "Dara, why waste 20,000 Nigerian nairas on one meal when we can cook something even better at home?" That was the final straw. Dara snatched her hand from his grip, her face tightening with anger. "You're so stingy, Ola. You don't even try to make me happy. I need a man who can take care of me." Ola was stunned. "Dara, money isn't everything. I'm building a future for us. Don't let greed blind you." But Dara was already walking away, frustration boiling in her chest. She was done with his excuses. If Ola couldn't provide the lifestyle she deserved, someone else would. As she stomped down the dimly lit street toward her hostel at Tipper Garage, a sleek blue Toyota Camry slowed down beside her. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Bode, tall, dark, and dripping in wealth. Gold chains gleamed against his fitted black shirt, and his Rolex sparkled under the streetlights. "Hey, pretty girl. Need a ride?" His voice was smooth like honey. Dara hesitated for only a second before smiling. Everything she had been looking for had just pulled up beside her. She didn't think twice. She slid into the passenger seat. That night, she followed Bode home. That night, her fate was sealed. If only she had listened. If only she had seen the warning signs. But greed has a way of blinding the desperate. And now, as she lay draped in silk sheets in a bed too soft for a girl like her, Dara had no idea she was lying beside the devil himself. The moment Bode entered her life, everything changed. He wasn't just rich, he was powerful, influential, and dangerously charming. His words were smooth like butter, and his promises were sweeter than honey. Dara had never felt so desired, so important, so special. Every morning, she woke up to credit alerts. 200,000 Nigerian nairas today. 500,000 Nigerian nairas tomorrow. It never stopped. She no longer worried about school fees or hostel rent. Bode had it covered. Her wardrobe transformed overnight. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Prada gone were the cheap bend-down select outfits she used to wear. Her friends envied her. Her enemies resented her. And she loved every second of it. One evening, as she lounged in Bode's mansion, sipping imported wine, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Baby, I need you to do something for me." Dara smiled lazily. "Anything for you, love." Bode's fingers traced patterns on her thigh. "There's this small ritual I have to do for business. Nothing serious. Just a little sacrifice." Dara's heart skipped a beat. Sacrifice? Her mind flashed back to all the stories she had heard. Young girls disappearing, found lifeless in abandoned buildings. But Bode wasn't like that. Was he? She forced a laugh. "Ah, Bode, are you trying to scare me?" He grinned. "Relax. It's nothing you need to worry about." But the way his eyes darkened sent a shiver down her spine. That night, Dara couldn't sleep. She heard footsteps outside her door, whispering voices, doors opening and shutting. A part of her wanted to run, to pack her things and disappear before she became one of those missing girls. But then, in the middle of the night, her phone vibrated. 1 million Nigerian nairas has been deposited into your account. And just like that, her fear melted away. Who cared about whispers in the night when her bank account was smiling? She convinced herself it was nothing. She closed her eyes. And she slept in the arms of the devil. Days turned into weeks. The gifts kept coming, and Dara grew addicted to the lifestyle. But she began to notice things that didn't make sense. Small Blue Diamond, the strange shrine in Bode's private room, filled with candles, blood-stained clothes, and pictures of different women. Small Blue Diamond, the way his phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. every night, and he always answered in hushed tones. Small Blue Diamond, the red cloths he kept under his pillow. Small Blue Diamond, the random girls who came and never returned. Her instinct screamed at her to leave. But greed held her hostage. And then, one night, everything changed. Dara sat before Bode's grand mirror, admiring her beauty. Her glowing skin, her expensive jewelry, her designer dress. She had finally become the woman she always wanted to be. She smiled at her reflection. But then, she saw it. Something moved beneath her skin. A small lump crawled up her thigh, wriggling just beneath the surface. Dara gasped, stepping back. Her heart pounded. "What the hell?" she whispered. She lifted her dress and screamed. Tiny white maggots were writhing under her skin. Her veins bulged, moving as if something alive was crawling inside them. No, 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 and no. She clawed at her skin, desperate to get them out. She stumbled out of the room, gagging, shaking, sobbing. "Bode. Help me." She ran into the living room, but he was gone. His car, his clothes, his presence vanished. All he left behind was a note on the table. "Thank you for your sacrifice." Dara felt her knees buckle. And that's when the real nightmare began. The pain grew unbearable. The maggots crawled out of her private parts, falling onto the expensive marble floors, squirming in the moonlight. The stench of rotting flesh filled the mansion. Dara screamed until her throat bled. She stumbled outside, still wearing her expensive dress, her hair tangled, her face drenched in tears. She ran into the streets of Ilorin, begging for help, but everyone ran from her. Her beauty was gone. Her wealth was meaningless. Now she was just a living corpse, decaying while still breathing. Dara collapsed in front of item 7, the same restaurant she once begged Ola to take her to. The irony. She had traded a man who loved her for a man who destroyed her. She had chosen money over morality, and now, she was paying the price with her life. As the cold air wrapped around her, she whispered, "Ola. I should have listened." Then, everything went black. The first sign of trouble was the whispers. Then came the disgusted stares. But nothing, could have prepared Dara for the moment she realized she had become a walking corpse. The morning air was crisp as she stepped into her lecture hall, clutching her handbag tightly. She tried to ignore the fact that every seat around her was empty, as if an invisible force had drawn a boundary around her. Then, it happened. A girl seated 2 rows ahead suddenly turned around, her nose wrinkled in pure revulsion. "What is that smell?" Dara's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Another student leaned toward his friend and whispered loudly, "Bro, it's coming from her." Head snapped toward Dara. The whispers swelled into murmurs, then murmurs into outright exclamations of horror. "Jesus Christ, she stinks like something dead." The professor, an elderly man with thin-framed glasses, paused mid-lecture. His gaze locked onto Dara, and for a fleeting moment, she saw pity in his eyes. "Miss Dara," his voice was measured, careful, like he was afraid of offending her. "I think you should." Before he could finish, Dara abruptly stood up. The movement sent a sickening wave of odor into the air, and the reaction was instantaneous. Students gagged. Some covered their noses with their books, while others physically turned away, as if shielding themselves from an unbearable stench of rot and decay. Dara felt like the walls were closing in. The world tilted. Her vision blurred as hot tears welled up in her eyes. And then, the ultimate humiliation struck like lightning. A boy in the back of the class suddenly leaped from his seat, shouting, "Witchcraft! She's possessed!" The entire hall erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped against the floor as students scrambled away from her. Some rushed toward the door, nearly tripping over themselves to escape. Others whispered prayers under their breath, throwing wary glances at her like she was a cursed being. Dara couldn't breathe. She felt trapped in a nightmare, standing there while the world rejected her presence. And then, she felt it. A horrible, wet squirming sensation. Dara looked down. Her horror knew no bounds. Tiny, wriggling white maggots were falling from under her skirt, landing on the floor with sickening little plops. The room exploded in screams. Someone fainted on the spot. A girl ran outside, vomiting violently into the bushes. Dara clutched her stomach, her breath coming in panicked gasps. How was this happening? Her trembling hands clutched the fabric of her dress, desperately trying to stop the nightmare from leaking out of her body. But it was too late. She had become a monster. A professor near the door shouted for the security guards, but Dara didn't wait. She turned and ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just ran. Through the campus, past the hostel gates, across the busy streets of Ilorine, the smell of fried akra and roasted plantains wafting through the air, mixing sickeningly with the stench clinging to her skin. She ran until her legs ached, until her lungs burned, until she couldn't run anymore. Then she collapsed. When she finally opened her eyes, she was curled up behind an abandoned building, her body shaking uncontrollably. The smell was stronger than ever, as if death itself was wrapped around her like a second skin. For the first time since this nightmare began, she let out a scream that pierced the night sky. A scream filled with pain, regret, and raw terror. She had nowhere to go. Nowhere to hide from herself. And no one to turn to. Except the one man she had thrown away. Ola had been sitting inside a small buka, sipping on his malt drink, when he heard the commotion outside. A group of students had gathered at the roadside, talking in excited, horrified whispers. "Did you hear what happened to Dara?" Ola froze. "They say her body is rotting. That maggots are literally falling out of her. Someone saw her running past the market, crying like a madwoman." Ola's chest tightened. He hadn't seen Dara in weeks, not since she had abandoned him for that scammer Bode. He had tried to warn her, but she had only laughed in his face. Now, it seemed karma had delivered its verdict. He threw a few naira notes on the table and rushed out, heart pounding as he followed the trail of whispers through the city. By the time he found her, she was curled up behind a run-down building, looking like a shadow of herself. Her once radiant skin was pale and covered in sweat. Her expensive wig was disheveled, her designer dress stained with filth. But worst of all was the overpowering, stomach-churning stench that surrounded her. Ola took a step closer and stopped dead. The ground beneath her was crawling with maggots. His stomach turned, but he didn't run. Instead, he whispered softly, "Dara, what happened to you?" She looked up, her eyes red with tears, her lips trembling. And in a broken voice she said, "Ola, help me." Ola sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the pain, he knew he couldn't leave her like this. So, with steady hands, he reached out. "Come. We're going to fix this." And as he helped her up, Dara broke down in sobs. Because for the first time in weeks, she felt something she had long forgotten. Hope. The night was heavy with whispers, whispers from the trees, whispers from the spirits that watched Dara writhe in agony. The old herbalist's shrine, hidden deep within the forest, was lit only by the flickering flames of burning herbs. The scent of bitter leaves and crushed roots hung thick in the air, but it was the smell of decay that overpowered everything. Dara was screaming. The potion the herbalist had forced down her throat burned like fire laced with needles. It twisted inside her, snaking through her veins, fighting the dark magic that had eaten away at her soul. Hold her down, the herbalist commanded. Ola and 2 other assistants grabbed Dara's flailing body. She kicked and fought, her nails clawing into the dirt, her eyes rolling back. Something is coming out, one of the assistants cried. Then it happened. A horrifying squelch filled the room as thick, writhing maggots poured from her mouth, her nose, her private parts. They squirmed in the dirt, sizzling as the herbalist threw a handful of powdered medicine over them. Dara convulsed violently, her screams turning into a guttural wail that didn't sound human. It was as if something deep inside her was being ripped out, clawing at her soul as it left. The herbalist worked relentlessly. He tied a red cloth around her forehead, chanting incantations that made the flames in the room flare wildly. You are still in the hands of the spirits, he warned, his voice a growl. You must face the final test before you are truly free. Dara's eyes shot open, but they were no longer hers. A dark presence had taken over. The air crackled with tension. A chilling voice that wasn't Dara's echoed through the shrine. She belongs to us. She gave herself willingly for wealth. Ola's breath hitched. No. She didn't know. Ignorance does not excuse greed, the spirit roared. Dara's body lifted off the ground, her limbs dangling like a puppet's. The herbalist gritted his teeth, gripping his staff. You will return to the underworld, he commanded. Dara is no longer yours. A windstorm erupted within the small room, extinguishing the flames. The herbalist grabbed a bottle of dark oil and smashed it against Dara's forehead. A blood-curdling shriek rang out. And just like that, she fell limp. When Dara woke up, she was lying in Ola's arms. The maggots were gone, but the pain, the shame, the memory remained. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I'm sorry. Ola held her tighter. You survived, Dara. Now teach others not to make the same mistake. And that's exactly what she did.